Hi, I'm Thomas Butler, and you're listening to CADENCE When I Die, a small show about composers and sound artists living in, working in, or just visiting Scotland. In this episode, we meet composer and clarinetist Bill Sweeney, whose recent work for cello is the subject of a new CD release on Delphian Records. Performed by Bill's long-term collaborator Robert Schumann, the CD features three major works: the Trio Licht for Cello Duet, the poet tells of his fame for cello and live electronics, and a sonata for cello and piano. The recordings represent a major body of work that takes as its influence such diverse interests as poets Hugh MacDiarmid and Jorge Luis Borges, the music of Schumann, and Gaelic psalm singing. I met Bill at the University of Glasgow, where he is a professor of music, and I began by asking him how the first piece on the CD, the Cello Duet, came about.
The Cello Duet was for the then RSAMD, for the Stringfest. And the first performance was with a very old cello that one of the cellists was playing, and the other one was the cello that was made during the week. So it was this white, unvarnished box.
I remember seeing that cello. It looked surprisingly beautiful when in its unfinished state.
And it sounded very good. Yeah. It really sounded very good. So that was for a specific thing. They wanted a piece for two cellos, which is not a sort of standard kind of commission. But I knew from working with the instrument before that actually you can make two cellos sound a bit like a band. So that sort of crossed with a couple of other things. I don't mean that pieces should be like a number of elements that you throw together and see what happens, but there often are things that intersect. And with the cello piece, there was the instrumental value of the instrument. They, again, referencing back to I'm interested in the sort of Gaelic psalm singing style, and using that to help getting the instruments to interweave with each other and work with each other. And the fragment of a MacDiarmid poem, which is there, by Wauchopside. It starts with images of the birds on the river. The particular thing for this piece, Trio Licht, is a blackbird that he hears singing in a silver birch, which is the Trio Licht. I'm wondering, do birds have geniuses? Genius artistic, or is this art at all,
For those of us who don't know very much about Gaelic psalm singing, explain how you use that in the cello piece.
Well, there's a lot of supposition as to how it came about. But basically, it's like the Genevan Presbyterian psalms coming into the Western Isles and hitting Gaelic culture, where there was no tradition of singing in parts in the sense of singing harmonies. Also, the kind of individualism of the approach to religion, particularly in the Free Church and so on, that although you as a community are coming together in the church, each individual is facing the abyss or heaven or whatever. So they sing same melody, but they sing it almost in their own time in places, with their own decorations. So all these sort of the type of decorations in Gaelic singing, traditional singing, get added on the spur of the moment by people as the spirit takes them. So when you get a congregation singing it, the tune becomes like a tidal wave, rather. And in there, in amongst this myriad of notes, are these very plain, sturdy Genevan psalm tunes. But the particular thing in Trio Licht, there's a very famous recording of the Gaelic psalms from Lewis. One of the tracks is of two ladies, the MacDonald sisters, singing a psalm. And how they do it is one of the sisters starts the phrase off and the other joins in. And it's like a sort of freely improvised canon. It's absolutely spellbinding. I mean, the tracks must be 12, 15 minutes long. And it's just very freely done, decorated, and they follow the outline of the psalm and repeat it. So it's not an exact repeat as in a canon, but a decorated individual repeat. And that was my cue for this piece, that the two instruments spend most of the time playing similar material, but not trying to copy exactly the other. but to lean into it in their own way.
So the second piece on the CD is the poem Tales of His Fame, which is a work, an electroacoustic work for live cello and live electronics. Yeah. Do you often work with live electronics?
From time to time. I was never into electronic music in a practical way back in the days of cutting tape and splicing it and all that sort of thing. But I came in with, with the MIDI thing, did a couple of things in the late 80s. Then I suppose really the next encounter was with PD in about 2000, 2001. And then another quite extensive piece I did using Mac's MSP with Fraser Spears, the harmonica player.
So for someone who hasn't used either Mac's or PD, just explain briefly what they are.
They're ways of manipulating sound in a way that no one else is predetermined for you. You open up a canvas. I think it's a quite deliberately chosen name for it. It's not a window, it's a canvas. And you pull on little objects and you tell the program what this object is. And then on the front, you will typically feed in a sample of sound, which comes in and is treated just as a row of numbers. The program does its calculations, then it goes out through a digital analog converter and comes back as sound. And the calculations are done virtually real time.
These are obviously very popular tools for people who do lots of live electronics and things like that. So do you program your own PD patches or do you get someone to do that for you?
I got a lot of help from Nick Fells, who works here in Glasgow, who is one of the experts, really, I think, anywhere on creatively working with these things.
And this piece is based on a poem. Which poem is it based on?
It's called The Poet Tells of His Fame by Jorge Luis Borges, who says that it's a translation from the Arabic, but no one has actually been able to find the Arabic poet. So it's another of Borges' little trails that he's left And it's a reflection on the way in which we as artists you pick up things from daily life, the daily life of people we know, and turn them into these art objects.
So what came first? Was it the idea of using PD, or was it the idea of the piece?
The poem of Borges that it takes the title from, they've been in my head for a long time. It's a very dark sort of poem, and it'd been around my head, and I was feeling, I wanted to do some things with it, but a sort of setting of it as a song just didn't seem ever appropriate. I was asked specifically to do a piece for live electronics, live player and electronics, and so I suppose the two things sort of came together. And in a way, the way in which the player is almost trapped within this environment, does things with it, changes it, but is essentially within this thing, seemed to me appropriate for the Borges idea of the person his art is turning against his own personality,
The idea of being trapped, that really struck me actually, and particularly the way the real life cello almost has to fight against this backdrop of electronic cello sounds.
Yeah. But the backdrop has actually been created by his own activity, which I suppose is the psychological loop, as opposed to the musical loop in a way. Yeah,
it's certainly a very dark piece. I found
there's nowhere else to go with that particular poem of Borges than it's extremely dark. It asks very hard questions about what artists do at times, not just creative artists in our field. I suppose a lot of comedies like that as well. There's that feeling, the tools of my art are humiliation and anguish. So it is a very difficult poem for any creative artist to deal with.
So the third piece on this CD is simply entitled Sonata for Cello and Piano. What makes it a sonata?
I expect it to be played in concerts, in a concert room with two players in front of an audience who are in the middle of other repertoire of that kind of ilk. And I suppose calling it a sonata for cello and piano is in some ways a little bit of a cop-out, in that I didn't want to invent some other imaginative thing, because there wasn't really anything extra musical about it. There was a sort of musical thing extra me, if you like, in that I wanted to get that feeling of Schumann where he's got this wonderful way of landing you right in the middle of the music. You know, the way in which you get at I think possibly my favourite piece, certainly at the moment, of Schumann, the Fantasy in C major, the piano Fantasy, where it's just zoom, you've got these arpeggios, bum ba da da dee da da, you're in it. So that was something in me. I wanted to get something of that spirit of being in the middle of this turmoil, and I suppose finding a way through it in the end. So I suppose sonata implies that there's some kind of logical narrative or some kind of psychological narrative which finds its way through to the end.
There is certainly harmonic logic in all the pieces on this particular CD. I mean, would you describe yourself as a tonal composer?
Well, yeah, I can then sort of get on another of my hobby horses and say I don't think there's any other sort. Atonal is one of these words that was brought in to describe very chromatic music, and to, I suppose, to try and describe a way of avoiding the most obvious aspects of tonality. But I just think that tonality is something that's inescapable, because tones have relationships with each other. Intervals are relationships. I think my parting of the ways, because given my age and the way musical life was at that time, there was an inevitability about becoming a serialist and grappling with that. But I began to rebel against it when it was partly the sort of law of diminishing returns. Very, very exciting, to scatter all these notes around and to have various rules that meant you could do them and say, that's got a logic, because I've got that. But when I started to teach composition in a way and in various ways and thinking about it, when I came across these instruction books where we stop talking about pitches and it's pitch class and it becomes a number, and we're told that that a major third is the sum of 4 semitones, and it's just not.
No, it's a major third.
It's a major third. It's a ratio of 5 to 4 usually, and you've got some leeway in the third even at that. It's a ratio. The question of 4 semitones, the question is which size of semitones are, is it? And to me that was a kind of intellectual fracturing of realising this is not a true metaphor for what is going on in music. So in that sense, I think it's inescapable.
Do you think your thoughts on that are derived from your playing experience? Because you will know that not all semitones are the same size.
Yeah, I think inescapably, and I think certainly, playing and being a single line instrument, always wanting to construct a logic of the phrase, has been influential.
There's a Finnish connection to this piece.
Well, yes, I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to write a large-scale chamber piece, particularly for Rob Irvin. And a few years ago, I went on a Erasmus exchange at the University of Turku in western Finland. And quite by chance, there was a cello recital on in the little Sibelius Museum in Turku while we were there. And my wife and I decided to go along. Erkki Lahisma was the name of the cellist who came in. And he just started playing, and within about 3 notes of the beginning of the Beethoven F major sonata, you just felt relaxed. Yeah, this is going to be fine. This is a player. It just spoke that way. I emailed Rob Irvin and I said, I've just heard this terrific player in Finland. Do you know him? And he emailed back because they're a friend of his who'd already done an exchange in Glasgow. A year or so later, I got the chance of a residency at the Kone Foundation's place in Sari, which is near Turku. And so the idea was sort of bred that if we could do it so that the piece was for Robert and for Erkki, and that they could do the first performance in either country. So Erkki did the first performance in Scotland, Robert did the first performance in Finland. And by that time I had written the piece for two cellos, so they played that as well. The project had a good feel about it from the start because it involved people whose playing I loved.
My thanks to Bill. The music was performed by cellist Robert Irvin, who was joined by fellow cellist Erkki Lersma for the duet, and by pianist Vali Pavri for the sonata. Complete recordings of these works are available on the CD Triolicht, which is out now on Delphian Records. I'll Cadence When I Die will be back next month. Thanks for listening.